Welcome to the Jaybe Show on Revolutionary Blackout Network. I am your host, James Fauntleroy. So good to see all of you here on this Sunday afternoon. Just to let you guys know, you can always catch me here as well on Thursdays for the Savvy and Jaybe Show, and on my own personal channel, the Jaybe Font channel, on Tuesdays at 3. So while we're at it, if you guys have not already, please go ahead and give a like to the stream. This helps us out very much to be able to reach more people, to encourage and inspire and inform. So thank you so very much for that. Also, please consider sharing and subscribing as well. This also deeply helps us out very much so that we can also reach more people. If you have not already, you guys can actually go to our Substack at revolutionaryblackout.substack.com. This gives you email notifications whenever we go live. So you guys have that there as well. And if you guys would like to get in contact with us, you guys can get in contact with us at revolutionaryblackout@outlook.com. So you guys can submit any stories or encouraging words that you guys may have as well. So thank you very much for that. Good to see everybody that's watching on live right now. I tried to put in for Rumble. For some reason, Rumble's not working today. So if you guys were waiting for it to start on Rumble, my apologies. It's just not working. I don't know what's going on. Somebody needs to go to Peter Thiel and ask him what the hell is going on. But anyways, or not, don't even bother with that guy. But if you guys would like to, you guys can come in here to the YouTube side and also support the channel that way. If you guys have not already, please go ahead and like the stream. Now, just to let you guys know, as per usual, whenever we have guests, we always like to get to them first because we like to be respectful of their time. So thank you very much for your patience in that. So what are we talking about today? So let's show the thumbnail. So we have a couple things we're going to be talking about today. Well, later in the show, we're going to be talking about a man that was denied a transplant. And this is basically within my wheelhouse. So we're going to be talking about this story a little bit later. But first, we're actually going to be talking to some representatives of the mutual aid group Food Not Bombs in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Of course, I'm here in Orlando, so they're just a stone's throw away from me. But I would like to have this discussion with them about their activism as well as any type of challenges that they've been receiving as of late. So I would like to introduce Luke, Carlos, and Caleb to the stage. Thank you guys so much for coming on. Nice to have you.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, JB, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you so very much for coming on. One of the things that I first wanted to ask you guys, especially as far as your activism is concerned, is what drove you to be a part of Food Not Bombs? Now, if I'm not sure if you guys know, but a few weeks ago, many weeks ago, I actually had on Keith Henry, who was one of the co-founders of Food Not Bombs, on here as well. And it was quite a story about how he started it. But I would like to get you guys' your perspective of why you guys chose to join this mutual aid organization and to feed your neighbors in Fort Lauderdale.
You want to go first, Caleb?
Sure. I was a Bernie bro back in 2020. I was, upset by Bernie getting, probably wanted to lose that primary. And then I showed up to the protests for George Floyd, and I saw Miami wage war with its people. And incredibly, I saw spontaneous action in response, and that riot nearly burned down the Miami police station. Like it was close. More people, a little bit more, it would have happened. And then when it didn't happen, when the Miami police used tear gas, rubber bullets, and an armored vehicle with LRAD sound cannons, the riot broke up and it went to the nearby luxury mall and smashed that mall to bits.
Wow.
That, to me, that was just completely life-changing to see not only the reality of how this country works in the state's response, but also the power of the people. And these were everyday people. These were not, I was an everyday person. These were not committed organizers with lots of experience. They were showing up to a protest that they believed in, and they were pushed to a breaking point by the actions of the state. And so that's what radicalized me, that moment. And I've pursued anti-statist organizing ever since. I've been really, really pleased to be able to organize with Food Not Bombs Fort Lauderdale. They have a really long and storied history here in South Florida. And yeah, I've been really, really pleased to be a part of that. I really enjoy how we are not just a food share organization. We're certainly not a charity. We are a horizontal mutual aid organization, but we use the food share and the relationships that come from it as infrastructure and apply that infrastructure to a wide variety of movements, from the abolition of the police, prisons, to the liberation of Palestinian people, and organizing against local weapons manufacturers. And that has been incredibly powerful to me, to see the mutual aid organization as anti-statist infrastructure that empowers the movement as a whole.
Very well. Thank you very much for that. Luke, what is your motivations?
Well, I mean, this could be a long story. I could go. I'm 62 years old, and I could go back to my 20s in the military. But I'm not going to do that. Let's fast forward to it is about 2010 or so. I've kind of gotten involved with Occupy Fort Lauderdale. I am completely disenchanted with the duopoly, with capitalism as a whole, and I started getting involved with Occupy Fort Lauderdale because obviously, the money issue, the capitalism thing, is the root cause of our problem. The glorification of greed as an economic system. Needless to say, extremely problematic. And so I ended up. I got sick. I have some health issues, and I got sick. But I saw in the paper where Pastor Arnold at that time and Food Not Bombs Fort Lauderdale were basically staging shenanigans against the Fort Lauderdale PD, who were not allowing us to share food with hungry people, even as a political protest. And I saw that from my hospital bed, and I was like, that's where I need to be. That's the front line, locally. So I did that. I showed up at the meetings, and after a while, after a couple of years, my daughter started coming too, and I did it for a long while. And lately, I've had to, due to same health reasons, back off a little bit. But I still keep my finger involved, and I still help out, provide transportation, show up at a sharing every once in a while, that kind of thing.
Wow, this is very inspiring. Caleb, like you said, everyday people, making sure that your fellow neighbors are taken care of. It kind of makes me think, one of the things here, those of us here at RBN, we try to inspire is to, encourage people to do what you're doing. And the reason why I personally like to have people who aren't widely known is because I don't want there to be some thought that the people in front of me on my screen, whether it be your television screen, your phone screen, or computer screen, that they are somehow otherworldly more capable than me, And I want them to realize that they are that you are just as capable as them, and they are just as capable as you. The step is really to just start and do something, And it may not be starting a whole new mutual aid organization. It could be joining one like Food Not Bombs, right? There's a Food Not Bombs here in Orlando as well. Or it could be like a real Orlando, People's Free Kitchen here in Orlando, right? There's many mutual aid organizations all over. And I also want to give a shout out to my comrade Savvy Sabs, because she's actually doing mutual aid workshops from her channel. where she actually has a Zoom call and she teaches mutual aid, on a monthly basis to her viewers. So anybody is able to come in and sit and learn, the basics of building mutual aid. Even when it comes to just joining an organization, right? And so, first of all, I really want to give you guys your flowers, because I think it's important that more people speak to individuals like yourselves, so that they learn that the power really is in our hands. I'm dating myself a little bit, but kind of reminds me of the old show Captain Planet and the Planeteers, and that towards the end he will always say the power is yours. Well, that's true, right? The power really is in your hands. And so I just wanted to thank you guys for reminding people of the power that they have.
Yeah, I think that along those lines, a lot of organizers really treat revolution as this really academic, scientific process that you need to go read this very long list of books. You need to do X, Y, and Z before you can even start. But that's not true. Like, the scientific method is based fundamentally on experimentation. Revolution is a constant experiment, and realistically, humanity has forgotten more about the art of revolution than we currently know. We have thousands of years of organizing against empires, and to think that all of that knowledge is readily available in a handful of books from the 1800s, that's just not accurate. We need to be constantly pushing the limits. We need to constantly be innovating. And yeah, if you know how to throw a potluck, you know how to do mutual aid. It really is that simple. There's a lot of resources out there. You can certainly get better at it. And as we move further and further into that fascist state, we need to get better at it. But yeah, it really is that simple. We need to work on building basic survival programs on a neighborhood by neighborhood level.
It's as if, like, you already have tools. It's just you got to use them, and then you can incorporate theory into that and see, like, this is why. But you already have the tools at your fingertips. Like, for instance, there is a comrade who is part of the Orlando chapter here, and if he finds out you're a comrade, because he actually does computer software repair and computer repair, then he'll give you a huge discount. If not, he'll do it for free, because that's his contribution to his comrades, right? And so, and that's his wheelhouse, is computer in information technology. And shout out to you, Tim. But the thing is that if he just starts off with that before reading theory, he's already like halfway there, right? But then on top of it, the theory also shows all the more nuts and bolts and things like that, right? And it helps you to be able to understand. So, that's why I think it's such an important thing to at least start off. And we've had members of Real Orlando here. They are also a mutual aid group out of Orlando that does really great work. And one of the things they said was, all we had was a few dollars in our pockets, and we had our own kitchens, and then we started just making food for the community and feeding people out of our own kitchens with the few dollars that we had in our pockets. And that was it. That's all they did to start. And then through the action, on top of learning as well, now is this movement really that's growing here in Orlando.
Yeah, I love Real's focus on growing their own food. I find that to be really, really empowering, to not be spending money necessarily on mutual aid, but finding ways to bring resources together without that monetary transaction.
Yeah, definitely. So one of the things I want to go to as well is,
one of our ongoing themes and one of our ongoing things in for focus on getting things that we need, not necessarily cash aid. We use the cash aid for things that we need it for, like jail support and legal aid and things like that, and supplies, little supplies like that. But we usually are not focused on raising money. We usually were focused, and we can check in with Caleb on this, but I'm pretty sure it stays that way. We're usually focused on getting the things that we need rather than collecting money to then decide how we're going to spend it.
Yeah, sure. And I mean, we really get a lot of bang for our buck, because the money is a resource that we keep, that we only use on things that we really need it for. Everything else is we're going out, we're getting ourselves, we're finding donations, we're working with local growers, or we're growing it ourselves. Yeah.
Great. So you guys are focused on the resource aspect of it, not necessarily the monetary. And even still, the monetary is used to assist people. Now, you guys said that you guys do aid for people who may be incarcerated, for things like bail funds, things like that. If you guys can get into that as well, because I think that's something that a lot of people aren't really aware of when it comes to Food Not Bombs, especially your chapter of Food Not Bombs, is that you guys do more than just food sharing. It also involves things like activism. I know you guys are also heavy in activism in regards to opposing the Zionist genocide that's going around in Gaza right now. You guys are also trying to make sure that people who are jailed for, really just doing mutual aid and trying to help their community, that they're not stuck there without a way out. And so if you guys can expand on that a little bit too.
Yeah, I mean, abolitionists are fond of saying that.
Sure. Go ahead, Caleb. You take this one.
We'll respond to saying that all prisoners are political prisoners. But honestly, the movement's not really following through on that. I certainly saw that in federal prison. We need to scale that up on a much bigger level. Food Not Bombs, one of our longtime partners, is the community hotline for incarcerated people, which organizes a jail hotline in the Broward County Jail. And it focuses on everything from
a dungeon.
Yeah. Broward County Jail is notorious. It focuses on everything from basic sanitation to significant medical neglect to outright murder by the guards. And yeah, I mean, the dungeons of this country are full of halfway radicalized people, and their families are halfway radicalized.
Wow.
And is really missing a big opportunity there to connect to those people, to show them just that little bit more that they need to see how it all fits together. Because they certainly see the conditions that they're facing themselves, but then they get sidetracked by, oh, Donald Trump's gonna, doge and it's gonna reform and it's all gonna be better. Or it's, some crazy conspiracy theory about the Illuminati or whatever. They all have their reasons, but they see the real world conditions that they're facing. And if we can come in and we show that, first of all, we're here to help and to organize in mutual solidarity with one another, and then here's our understanding of the world. How can you show us your understanding, and let's have a conversation for how we can get to a better place. Because neither political party is going to get to where we need to get to. And there are a lot of organizations in civil society, from blue book unions to large scale nonprofits to the mainstream media, that are just, they're not the solution either. And so we see Food Not Bombs, as well as our community partners like CHIP, as anti-statist, revolutionary infrastructure to connect to a broader segment of the victims of the carceral state in this country.
Awesome. Quick thing is that one of the things you mentioned is the people who are the people who are incarcerated and the families of people who are incarcerated are halfway radicalized. This is a conversation that me and the comrade here on RBN Rome, we have had. And he's spoken about this many times. There is a sleeping giant in this nation that has revolutionary potential. And that sleeping giant is people either who are formerly incarcerated or are presently incarcerated and their families. Because one thing, and trust me, I know because I've had family members of mine incarcerated. When your family member goes in, you go in with them. And so you also have to experience the incarceration from the outside and seeing your family member on the inside. I'm sorry, go ahead. What was that?
Nope.
Oh, I thought I heard somebody respond.
I didn't say anything. I completely agree with what you were saying.
Oh, okay, cool. And that sleeping giant, once you start to explain to people that, for instance, people will say, "Oh, well, the Democrats are trying to help us." It's like, well, no, because you have the author of the '94 crime bill, which is one of the reasons why your loved ones is serving as long of a sentence as they are right now. Or, you have somebody like Kamala Harris that has been notorious for jailing people in California. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
yeah,
so,
it didn't. Let's be clear. This didn't start recently. This didn't start within the last decade or even the last 2 decades. I have watched this temperature, this water, be heated up slowly over the course of at least 40 years. They have been the duopoly has been playing this game of ratcheting to the right and ratcheting farther to the right. And then they just did it's okay because everything will be fine because we're not really headed towards fascism. And here 40 years later, we are disappearing people off the streets. We are talking about the ants eating the elephant because we are fighting an asymmetrical conflict. They have all the power and all the weapons, and we just have each other. Mm-hmm. So that all of those ideas have to come together. I remember we talked about. I know Nick. Nick likes to call for a general strike, and I like the idea of a general strike. But I also know that from working with Food Not Bombs for Lauderdale and with other activists, that it takes a lot of building. Like we're not there yet. We are working on it. We need to have not just Fort Lauderdale Food Not Bombs. We need to have everybody in a different. It doesn't matter what you call yourself. If you're a mutual aid organization, we need to be holding hands with each other.
Absolutely, and that was well said. As far as and while I definitely agree with a general strike, that is the last ditch effort we have towards what we like to call a peaceful revolution. And they're really locking a lot of us out of that, right? The powers that be. And so it's like, if you're going to try for that, you better try to get all your ducks in a row now. And, but at the same time, the powers that be, they know that, all they got to do is lock up a couple of things. And next thing you know, it's like, it makes it almost impossible. So, that I think that's one of the reasons why, I said that, the people who are incarcerated really are a sleeping giant, because if you're able to even just activate them in a way where it shows that the system is designed this way. Because a lot of times, some people who are incarcerated will still place the blame on themselves completely in an absolute way, when in reality, it's the blame is relative rather than absolute. Like, yeah, did you make some mistakes in your life? And so could you have done some things differently? Sure. But at the same time, when it comes to the system, it also pushes people in a way where it puts them under duress in order to do these things, in order to push them into that position. For instance, you have people who may do some exploitative things, as far as substance abuse and things like that, in order to be able to make a few extra dollars, because look at the wages have remained stagnant for the last 25, almost 30 years. And so at least the last 20 years. And so
that's an ongoing truth.
Yeah.
That's an ongoing truth. What when people are moved by the system to be put in desperation into a desperate system, of course they make bad decisions. Of course they're not worried about morality. They're starving, hungry. They are sick. They are desperate. When a system puts people into a desperate situation, and then they respond the way every desperate human being responds, which is not rationally, and then you punish them. Does that sound like a civilization? Does that sound civilized to you? Does that sound humanitarian? Does that sound like we're putting life and dignity and respect for human beings first systemically? I think that's where we all want to be. We all want to be, putting life and dignity and respect first, and this is not it.
Well, that reminds me of the quote. One of my new favorite quotes that I discovered within the last year is, if a flower doesn't bloom, you change the environment in which the flower grows, not the flower. The problem is we're a bunch of flowers that are trying to bloom, but the problem is that the environment in which we're growing doesn't facilitate that. It's not cohesive with our development. So therefore, the only solution really is to change the system dramatically in order for us to be able to actually bloom.
It's being actively poisoned. The system is actively poisoning where we're being planted.
That's true. That's true. Yeah.
I think that the restriction of abortion rights is particularly an interesting connection between what you're talking about, because one of the ways that people end up in situations where they're breaking the so-called law in order to make money is that they need to support their kids. And maybe their children are unplanned. And in that situation, when you already do not have access to a living wage and stable employment and stable housing, then of course you're going to turn to black market ways to make money. I think so. I went to federal prison as a James Revenge defendant, and for tagging 3 fake clinics here in Florida. 2 of those fake clinics are in historically black neighborhoods, and one of them is in a historically Cuban neighborhood. All 3 of these neighborhoods are targets of gentrification, and you see in that the Christo-fascist agenda to target struggling communities of color. And then in prison, my friend Joker, he makes this joke one time that everyone in prison has a baby mama. And that sent my mind spinning, because when you criminalize abortion, when you trick people into not seeking out actual reproductive health care with fake clinics, then you're building a future for them that is not stable and that could lead to incarceration.
Mm-hmm.
Particularly in a community of that's being gentrified, because now the fake clinics are literally part of that gentrification. By tricking people out of reproductive health care, they're leading to greater displacement.
Mm-hmm. Can we stay on this for a second? Because here we are, from as far as appearance goes, 3 men, right? Speaking on this issue. I will make this a definitive statement. Abortion is a class issue.
Yes.
It's not just a social issue, it is a class issue.
That's right.
Yes,
When a government representative
without doubt.
talks about human capital stock as far as humans go, it meant that the constant having of children meant that they get to replace and keep and replenish the amount of workers that they could have so that they can exploit. And so ultimately, that's what it's about. And I'm gonna push the envelope here and take it what you will. This is also one of the reasons why LGBTQ people in this country are also demonized, because we go against the creation of the human capital stock, and so therefore we are deemed less worthy. It's like tie back into class when people think about it. And so, that mixed with, the criminal justice system and how it treats those of us who are incarcerated, it's really a microcosm, not a microcosm, it's an amalgamation of so many different things revolving in class, and this is the intersection of class and identity as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, without doubt, that is exactly true, and I think Caleb's story really highlights that, and also it highlights the connection of everything, because Caleb hasn't talked about it yet, but I kind of like to get him to talk about the connection between his activities, his and the affinity group's activities in the on the abortion clinics against these fake. I don't even want to call them abortion clinics. These fake. I hate calling them clinics. They're not clinics. They're fake. They're completely fake. But I would like to hear his story. I know he has a story about the suspected connection between the abortion issue and Palestine. Like we talk about how things are all connected. This is a chance to take a look here at this unusual connection. I think Caleb's story can do that.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I was just getting at with these fake clinics being drivers of gentrification is colonization. And so you see not only that their tactics are the same general ideology of colonization, but also you see that they're the same people. That these there are more Christo-fascist Zionists in America than there are Jewish people worldwide. Jewish or anti-Zionist and Zionist are real drivers of what puppet state is are American Christo-fascists, and I really experienced that myself because I took a plea deal on the Jane's Revenge graffiti, and unlike the two co-defendants that pled out with me, I got 12 times as long of a sentence as them. I got a year and a day in federal prison. The reason is I had 2 pretrial violations. Shortly after the murder of Tortuguita in Atlanta, I was wheat pasting flyers against Cop City in Atlanta, near the Coral Gables location of Brassfield and Gordon. They are the general contractor that was building Cop City, Atlanta. I was arrested. It was ridiculous charges. They were quickly dropped in state court, but it was a pretrial violation for my federal case. They put me on a curfew, and I had a landline to check in every evening. And then after the genocide in Gaza began and the prison break on October 7th, we, the Fort Lauderdale Food Not Bombs, organized a campaign against a local subsidiary of Elbit Systems, the largest private Israeli weapons manufacturer. They have a location just a few miles north of Fort Lauderdale and Boca Raton. They make tank parts for the U.S. military that get exported to Israel. And the feds found out that I was going to these protests, I was organizing these protests, and I was not supposed to be in Palm Beach County, where Boca Raton is. This was a second pretrial violation. And normally when you have a violation for leaving your confined area, the feds just apply a new pretrial condition to make it more difficult to leave the area, such as an ankle monitor. My judge did not do that. He thought it was a mistake on my part, but not a very serious mistake. But then I go to sentencing, and it became very clear that the combination of militant action for abortion rights and against Christofascism, wheat pasting against Cop City and for the abolition of the police, and organizing against a local weapons manufacturer and for the liberation of the Palestinian people. That combination was seen as a far greater threat than my co-defendants, who simply had the one knock against them, if you will. So yeah, the judge didn't say any of this out loud, but we know that judges, their job is to propagandize and legitimize the will of the state. And I see my sentence very much as a response by the state. And I don't want to sound, I don't mean to be arrogant. Like, at the end of the day, my actions were small. It's graffiti, it's wheat paste, it's sidewalk protests. We're not, fighting a revolution here. But if we saw a lot more people engage in these type of tactics and connect these seemingly disparate issues in the way that my organizing and Food Not Bombs Fort Lauderdale does, you would see a lot more pressure on this government, on this capitalist state.
Wow. It's quite it's quite harrowing to know that a lot of times when we talk about the system, a lot of times people will say that, well, you have to go through the proper channels in the system, and the system, you'll find justice. And no, I don't believe that there's really justice in this, what we call the criminal justice system. Because if there was criminal justice system, then they honestly would be more on your side when it comes to fighting against entities that perpetuate a 21st century Holocaust. But instead, they're defending them because they're property, private property. And it's like, well, I don't care if they're private property. They're doing horrible things to horrible people on the other side of the world. Like, shouldn't that take precedent? Shouldn't the lives of people take precedent over property? But yet it's not believed to be that way within the system. And a lot of times this is why we talk about changing the system entirely, because we have to have a system that is geared towards community and society rather than profit. And so even though you said you're not leading a revolution, and doing graffiti or anything like that, that still is an act of resistance that can inspire people to make waves, as far as making sure that people are, I'm trying to parse my words carefully because we're on YouTube, but in making waves so that people's lives are preserved and people are given the ability to thrive rather than merely survive or be taken out because they dare defy a system. You know?
Yeah.
And so that's why, you know, whenever I look at, here's the nerd in me coming out again, you know, it takes me back to, I'm not sure if you ever saw Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, but remember what Mace Windu said? He said he has control of the Senate and the courts. He's too dangerous to be left alive. I say the same thing about the system. It has control of the Senate and the courts. It's too dangerous to be left existing.
Yeah.
And so, you know, what you did is it was kind of like a revealing of, hey, this is what the system does, even if you try to preserve the life of other people on the other side of the world.
Yeah, I mean, the system, its only check is legitimacy and physical power. And so, like, the Democrats can say all they want that they're pro-abortion, but at the end of the day, it was the Biden administration that put me in federal prison for abortion graffiti.
Yeah.
And we know that it was all the way up to the top of the Biden administration, because when we were negotiating for the plea agreement, the DOJ's director of civil rights said that she had to check in with her bosses to see if this plea agreement was acceptable to them. Her only bosses are the attorney general, vice president, and the president. Those are the only people above her in the chain of command. So it went all the way up. It was a political calculation. It was the state needed to repress Jane's revenge, regardless of what political propaganda of these political parties is. And yeah, it's when you see wins inside courtrooms or wins in any sort of statist realm, they're small wins, temporary relief at best, and at worst, they're not wins at all because they come at the expense of something else that supports the state's agenda. I think about the Teamsters. I've literally been on Teamsters pickets and helped UPS workers secure a better contract. And then I go to federal prison and I notice that all of the prison guards have Teamsters local on their jacket, because prison guards used to transport prisoners to the plantation as chain gangs. So they drove them, they're Teamsters, right? I think of the Artists Guild, that their work stoppage was not an effective pressure on the system until the genocide in Gaza began. And then the military-industrial complex needed their war propagandists to get back to work. And so they got a better contract once the genocide in Gaza began. And so fighting these battles within the halls of government, in the courtroom, in blue book unions, in any dimension of the state, it's ultimately a doomed strategy. By contrast, anti-statist organizing is not dependent on that at all. It's a fundamentally different power base. It's a different playing field. Graffitiing something is a very small example, but my favorite example is the Elm Creek John Brown Gun Club. They showed up to a street sweep of a houseless encampment in Dallas, armed to the teeth. And the police had two choices: start a gunfight or back down. That was it. There was no one to corrupt. There was no, courtroom propagandists to legitimize repression. It was one or the other. And the state backed down. The houseless encampments were not swept. Similarly, Food Not Bombs, Fort Lauderdale, and some previous organizations in Miami are starting to transition away from the traditional model of Food Not Bombs mutual aid, which is to set up a table on the sidewalk in a very accessible and visible location, and towards a guerrilla mutual aid distro. This was really pioneered in South Florida by Hot Plates for the Houseless back in 2020, because Miami has had a much more significant repression against mutual aid than Fort Lauderdale has in the past 5 years anyways. And so we would show up in the dead of night, that distribute the food as quickly as possible and then set up a table and distribute clothing, because the police didn't have an ordinance to criminalize the distribution of clothing or any food. And so we get the food out quickly. By the time the cops got there, we're just giving out clothes. We're talking to people. We're building the relationships just like regular food, not bombs, but the cops can't do it. Obviously, you can scale that up to another level by just disappearing on the cops. The campaign to shut down Elbit in South Florida has been utilizing home rallies against the employees, which is a long and storied tactic here in South Florida of food not bombs. And that's why DeSantis made it illegal in 2022. And so Shut Down Elbit will show up to an employee's house, do a protest quickly, flyer the neighbors, and then disappear before the cops even get there. And then show up again at a different employee's house. And then the cops are now responding to that employee. And we switch up the jurisdictions. So it's one police department, then the next, then the next. And so this, I talk a lot about anti-statist organizing, and I think there's a really big focus in anti-statist organizing on street rebellions. You saw that really the height of it in 2020 with massive riots. But as we move further and further into late stage fascism, we're going to need to think more about guerrilla insurgency tactics. And I don't mean insurgency necessarily in violent revolution. I mean it like in the sense of showing up, giving out food, and disappearing before the cops can catch you. Because any level of organizing is going to be repressed. It's going to be repressed more and more as time goes on in this country. And here in the South, repression's always been worse here. On top of that, a lot of the very well-organized leftist organizations on the West Coast and the Northeast, they disdain the South a little bit. There's certainly a societal-wide problem of disdaining the South. It's legacies from history, of course. It's the resource curse of the South, the natural resources contributing to the industrialization in the North. But as a result of that repression and lack of resources from the broader American left, the South has to do more with less. We have to organize against a more a less restrained state with less resources overall. And that's why you see the South really as the workshop for revolution in this country. We're constantly innovating. And I think that's particularly true here in South Florida because of our deep connections to the Caribbean, to Central and South America, and to the undefeated history of the Seminole resistance. Miami was founded by Bahamians and the formerly enslaved taking shelter in Seminole communities. And all of that comes together in a really interesting and innovative melting pot of revolution. And it's really no coincidence that there was a general uprising in Haiti 6 months before the 2020 uprising here in this country.
So, as far as what you said, especially in regards to us having to do more with less, and I'm not saying this is the end all be all, right? But do you think that a tactic such as because we do live in a ballot initiative state, of trying to get on the ballot to loosen restrictions on food sharing and protesting and direct action, is that a worthy avenue of going down, especially in the state of Florida? Because even though Florida is a ballot initiative state, of course we have the state house and Senate and the governor's mansion all under Republican control. Of course, Ron DeSantis is the governor of the state. is there any worthy push in that direction in order to help alleviate the pressure on organizations like Food Not Bombs? Is there any type of direction that you guys think you can go in that way?
From working from the top down is always for me, it always seems like a suspicious endeavor, because things get twisted when we start working from the top down. Things get twisted. Now, ballot initiatives are very, very democratic, and in the end, I think we are going to have to learn to vote on policy rather than people. I'm a big fan of taking personalities out of our politics as much as possible. So and like, for good and bad, and mostly for bad. Like, Bernie was a classic cult of personality that ensnared many people. And I mean, the silver lining is that we have so many now that are honest to God leftists, because they got so burned by Bernie. But getting back to the ballot initiative, yes, all pressure is good pressure, but I would say that we would have to temper our expectations of what that is going to accomplish, because as we have discovered, every win is met by a response that seems to make that win useless. So every time we do something, every time, when we're drawing attention to Elbit and Geo Group by going to the homes, they make it illegal for us to go to the homes. When we're drawing attention to the fact that food distribution in this country is a horrifying, inhumane mess, they make it illegal for us to do that. They try and make it illegal for us to do that. So, and then when that didn't work in Fort Lauderdale, now homelessness nationwide is now illegal. They've just turned up the heat on that. Like, camping is illegal. Everything, states can do whatever they want to make homeless people go somewhere else. They're allowed to cleanse their area of homeless people. It is now legal to do. And so everything that went before that is kind of in the background now, because now we have this much bigger problem, and that's the nature of the beast, and that has to be accepted. So if you want to do a ballot initiative that says, hey, let's relieve pressure on Food Not Bombs, that's awesome, because every inch is just that. It's an inch. It's a movement forward. But at the same time, we can never expect, as activists and as humanitarians, we can never expect a final victory. We can never expect that it's going to be easy for Fort Lauderdale Food Not Bombs. We can never expect that they're going to stop changing laws to make sure that we can't do things that are effective. We can't expect that. So the answer is both yes and no. Yes, if you feel passionate about that and you think you want to move that particular ball in that direction, I would say, yeah, go for it and gather as many people as you can. Gather your affinity group to organize and get that accomplished. But also realize that in the end, once you win and you've taken your victory, if you do win the battle, that it's not over. You wake up the next day and they have changed the law, and now suddenly something that wasn't threatening is now suddenly threatening, because they've adjusted it. They've adjusted the heat. They've adjusted to your thing. And as activists, I think we all have to keep that in mind, and we have to become close to the process. We have to enjoy the process of the fight, because the wins don't come that often. And when they do come, they're sudden and unexpected, and then they go away.
Gosh, you reminded me of a video that I played on Thursday, reminding us that you have to have joy in being revolutionary, because that's a part of it. They want us to be despondent. They want us to be downtrodden. They want us to be emotionally pressed. And part of you have to have joy in the process. It's just like
Exactly.
it's just like whenever I do mutual aid, I enjoy myself because not only am I helping my fellow neighbors, but it's also cathartic for me as well. So it's a symbiotic relationship, right? And so there's the joy in gathering the resources and then making sure that everybody's good. And it's like I want to change this world and I want to help the world win with a smile on my face, not with a scowl. And I think that's the beautiful part about what you guys are doing is that you're not just doing it with you have a seriousness, but you also still have a smile on your face while you're doing it. Because ultimately, that's what helps people to realize, okay, we're going to be okay. We just have to keep going. And it's that keeping up the morale of the community as well, right? But yeah, as far as doing the that aspect of ballot initiatives, I think it's a worthy cause, but at the same time, it shouldn't be our only fight. I think that what you guys are doing as well on the ground, especially in a more guerrilla fashion, of put the food together, get in, make sure the people are good, and then move out quickly, is also a great tactic as well. I know there are other organizations that do the same, and so I think it's also a really good idea for other people in different cities. For instance, people like Ron DeSantis have also made it illegal to panhandle, right? And then on top of it, the DeSantis regime has also made it, camping, illegal. Of course, they went to the United States Supreme Court to try to criminalize homelessness even further. And so I would also like to see more like mutual aid groups that are focused on like tenant, not just tenant unions, but tenant co-ops, things like that. Because I think that can also be a great boon to helping out the workers and the poor as well.
Yeah. I think one thing about mutual aid is you're building resiliency for yourself simultaneously. When you are in need of help, the power that you're building today will help you tomorrow when you need it. I really saw that. I mean, I've seen that many times, but the most stark example that I've ever seen is mental health in prisons. There is absolutely no mental health care in prisons. And so you see everyone in there. I mean, they're amateur therapists. Every single person in prison is an amateur therapist. It's mutual aid organizing. When I went in, I made a video that basically said, if anything happens to me, it wasn't me. It was the guards. I don't care what they're saying. It's the guards. And I said that over and over in my letters to my family, to people who wrote me. I think that's a really important and powerful way to support prisoners, especially the ones that are targeted by guards, because the number one reason that someone's going to be murdered and while they're incarcerated is for mental health conditions that experience psychosis. And so we really need to step up writing prisoners. I want to quote a fellow political prisoner, Eric King, who the audience may be familiar with from his actions in 2014 with the Ferguson uprising. I can't stress enough, you can save someone's life with mail. You can build a relationship which changes your entire existence in a good way through letters. So please write prisoners. I knew a guy in prison. He really struggled with addiction. He was taking an opioid blocker every month. And so right before his shot, he would use very large dosages of Suboxone. in order to feel it just a little bit. And he would always tell himself, my shot is tomorrow. I can use a bunch now, and I'm not going to be addicted. But then he would just switch to meth. And so 5 days later, with no sleep, not eating, he'd come to me, we would talk, and then he'd go sleep for a few days. And it was just this ongoing cycle every single month. And that's what addiction services looks like in prison. There is no addiction service. It's just a shot. And if you look up the shot, it says it's not going to work if you don't have other services, therapy. So yeah, I really worry about him. I'm going to be writing him a bunch. And I encourage everyone out there to form a relationship with political prisoners, and that includes everyone in prison. My co-defendant, Gabby, has just started her 4-month sentence in FCI Tallahassee. The feds convicted her of blinding the cameras while I graffitied the fake clinics. And even though she went to trial and had a pretrial violation, they gave her less time than me, which really underscores what I was saying earlier about the repression against Palestine. But yeah, we need to support Gabby because her sentence it's excellent that it's short, but it's also cruel because sentences that are less than a year long, they do not receive any of the time reductions guaranteed under the First Step Act and the Second Chance Act. Now, BOP has yet to publish her release date. We believe that is because they don't know whether or not to apply good time credits. Most people get 85%, only serve 85% of their sentence because if they don't get written up for disciplinary reasons. But usually BOP fronts those 54 days every single year. Now, the law states that it's for everyone. It's not for those who have over a year, but BOP policy is to front those 54 days. And so we think that BOP is consulting their legal experts on whether or not to give Gabby the 15% reduction or not. One of the best ways to guarantee that Gabby does get that 15% reduction and serves 3 or 4 weeks less time is by making sure that BOP knows that Gabby is cared for. So please write Gabby. They love to garden. They love to bake. Their favorite color is teal, and their favorite TV show is Adventure Time. She'd love art and poetry as well as reading suggestions. Please reach out. It's really, really important.
Yeah, and so for everybody, Gabby's that's their information there. I also put it in the link in the chat to help a comrade. Even mutual aid can even just be imparting encouraging words in a letter. Sometimes the easiest thing to do would be use the voice to text option on your phone, and then of course spell check afterwards. But then take that and then either email it to yourself and then have it printed out or something like that. And then once it's printed out, fold it up, put it in an envelope, put this address on there, ship it off. Things like that. Because a lot of times we have political prisoners, like for instance, we had, recently released Leonard Peltier. We have Mumia Abu Jamal that's still in prison, incarcerated. He's been incarcerated for over 40 years, as well as many other different people. And if you can do anything to assist them in keeping their morale up while they're enduring this trial that really the system puts them under, then you're doing the good work as well on the ground. So I just wanted to put that out there for you guys too, as well.
We also have a phone zap for a friend of mine inside Yazoo City. He was, for absolutely no reason, the BOP increased his security designation from minimum all the way up to threat to the government and transferred him to FCI or USP Terre Haute's notorious Unit D, which is known as the Counterterrorism Communication Control Management Unit. It is a black box covered in microphones and cameras, and it's primarily Muslim prisoners are incarcerated there because, of course, the war on terror is a racist war against Muslims. But he successfully argued his way out of that black box, and then sued the BOP for this completely unwarranted and insane increase in his security designation. As a result, his release date just keeps getting delayed. They didn't give him any time in a community transitional center under the Second Chance Act, which is a violation of that federal law. He has now passed his First Step Act transition date and has become part of a class action lawsuit by the ACLU against the BOP for violating the First Step Act. And we believe it's because it's retaliation for this lawsuit. He's suing for $1.4 million for 7 years of over incarceration inside this horrible prison in Indiana. And we've been calling Yazoo City to demand that he's transferred and demand that they follow federal law. His name's Stephen Passmore, and I believe I sent you his information. It's on Chip, South Florida's Instagram page as well.
I don't think I have that one.
Okay. It's at Chip, South Florida.
Oh, hang on. I think.
And then I don't have the information, but we have another Jane's Revenge defendant who was convicted for arson for firebombing a fake clinic in Wisconsin. We're working on finding out on how to mail him. So keep an eye on the Food Not Bombs social media page. His name is Hirindu. Of course, now I can't find his last name.
Hang on. Oh, that's oh, okay. I got you.
Yeah, Hirindu Rochaudhuri is in Wisconsin.
Oh yeah. Okay. I did have it. It was in the it was an Instagram.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Okay. So let me share this as well. All right. Okay.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. So it says Stephen Passmore was supposed to be moved to a halfway house in 2024. Why is he still in prison?
Yeah, the BOP hates when you sue them for their criminal actions. And they are, I mean, I fully credit the hundreds of letters that I got in federal prison for getting transferred to halfway house and house arrest. It's rare for anyone with a year to be transferred. Usually BOP just claims that it's administratively too burdensome for them. But they knew that their legitimacy would be questionable in the eyes of all of the people who wrote me, all of my loved ones, my community, and everyone paying attention to my case. So let's try and do that for Mr. Passmore. Let's try and do that for Gabby. And once we find Hirindu, let's try and do that for him as well.
Yeah, of course. So I'm going to put the link to the Instagram link in the chat. And so if you guys would like to, you guys can also see that as well. Because, you know, a lot of times, you know, people who are incarcerated, man, they're really going through it. And it's really as a punishment for fighting against the system that is completely unjust. So I want to make sure that I get this out to people.
They want the world to forget about those inside, to move on. But we can't let that happen.
Of course. Yeah, definitely. Actually, make sure I like this as well. And then I will tag it so I can always go back to it myself, and then I'll be able to share it on my end as well. And so, of course, the city has been, tamping down on not just food sharing, but of course on many different actions. You guys opposing genocide, you guys opposing, uh, you know, uh, abortion bans, things like that. So, I mean, you guys really are doing the work, to try to help liberate people of all stripes. So, I think that, a lot of people can take from your example and continue to, battle with this system. Look, it's a worthy cause. It's not easy, but it's definitely a worthy cause, especially in regards to making sure that people have the resources they need, and the material conditions that they need in order to be able to survive or even thrive. You know, because ultimately, a lot of people who are in prison right now, uh, for instance, are there because of the crimes, lack of opportunity and desperation that they had to do in order to be able to get there. Or sometimes it's there because of addiction. But why does the addiction happen in the first place? Well, a lot of times people don't want to talk about it, but trauma also is a gateway drug. And so, but why do people suffer trauma? Well, a lot of times these things are due to their material conditions as well. So it's just all these things that factor in order to exacerbate, uh, you know, the system, in order to keep more people within the prison industrial complex, to keep people so that they end up becoming slaves to the system. I think about the Angola prison in Louisiana and how they're still having people who are incarcerated as slaves picking cotton, right? This still happens. And I always tell people that watch out for that whole Made in America label, because that Made in America label also could mean that it's slave labor that created that.
That's right.
So
Yazoo City had a connected sewing factory for the Unicorn program, and hundreds of guys would show up every day as slave labor. They would get, for the sewing factory, they'd get paid $200 a month, but had to pay about $100 in fees and taxes. So they got $100 a month, and they were working full time.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Wow, it's crazy, man. It's crazy. Um, Also, what's coming up next with you guys that you can share? What is next coming up with you guys, and how can they, for people who are more local in South Florida and Fort Lauderdale, how can they get with you guys in order to be able to assist you in doing more direct action?
Yeah, our weekly food shares are Tuesdays at 6 p.m., 6:15 p.m. at Stranahan Park on Broward Boulevard. That's really the best way to get in touch with us. You can reach out online as well, of course. But yeah, show up. You don't need to bring anything, but of course, um, vegan preferred food, um, freegan, absolutely. And clothes, hygiene products, anything that anyone would need on the streets, um, zines, radical literature, um, and a willingness to get involved. And please wear a mask. We do have immunocompromised folks showing up. But yeah, that's the best way to build relationships with us. We're currently working on a legal and press strategy because the FBI recently did a knock and talk on some of our organizers' doors for shutting, associated with the campaign to shut down Elbit. That campaign published a zine exposing all Lockheed Martin locations in Florida, and the FBI did not like that. We've spoken with lawyers. There's absolutely no legal violation there whatsoever, but the FBI has a long history, of course, of intimidation and disruption and counterintelligence operations against leftist organizations. So you're going to be hearing a lot more about that from us soon. I know that we just republished the zine about Lockheed Martin, and we have one about Raytheon's locations coming out soon in Florida. So, yeah, we'll definitely be focusing on that. The campaign against Elbit is continuing. But yeah, the best way is absolutely to show up, get to know us. Don't feel shy. Just walk right up, say, "Hey, I'm here to help," or "Hey, I'm here for a meal," and we'll go from there.
Okay, and let me share the link tree as well. This is a Solidarity Network as well for them, so I just want to share that. And
the Solidarity link tree has links for Food Not Bombs, Shut Down Elbit. It really is a roadmap to several different organizations.
Yeah, definitely. And also on top of it, I just want to make sure that, yes, you are definitely making sure that everybody gets help as well. But also, if you guys want to assist Caleb as well, here is his chuff.org link as well. If you guys would like to give him any assistance whatsoever, then I also put that also in the chat as well, so you guys can have that too.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm the only one that had to go into substantial debt of my three co-defendants of about $17,000 to pay my lawyer and cover the restitution. So we're going to be continuing to fundraise.
Yeah, definitely. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody, gets this link as well, if in case they can assist you at all, and especially, during these trying times, because a lot of times they'll do this in order to slow you down or stop you or scare you into being frozen, in your type of activism. So I think it's important that we support each other. So, yeah, definitely. Here you go. All right. So, anything else you guys want to add before you head on out?
I really want to stress that anarchist dual power is different than what Lenin describes. Socialism for us grows outside of capitalism and the state, and it's focused on the dual power, the power that is going to tear down the old world and build a new world within the ashes. So Food Not Bombs is an anti-statist means of building a new world while we apply that infrastructure and power to tearing down the old.
All right. Thank you very much. And Luke?
Yeah. I'm with, obviously, Caleb and I are on the same page in so many different ways. Like everybody and what you said before, it all comes together in a big web. You do what you can and what you're able to do and what you know is the right thing and what you understand is effective. And each one of us, the anarchist, obviously, ideology is that we all get the dignity and respect. It's kind of like herding cats, because giving dignity and respect to people makes them difficult, because they suddenly have their own opinions and they suddenly want to do things that are not necessarily what you want to do. But that's actually what needs to happen. We need to learn how to work with each other. We need to learn how to herd cats with each other, so that we can create a system that's fair to all of us cats.
Yeah. And I saw Caleb, having his cat and make a little bit of a cameo, so that was nice. All right, guys. It's an honor and a privilege to have
Also,
you.
you can find me real quick.
Oh, sure.
I'm sorry. You can find me on Twitter real quick, just under Luke Carlos. I don't. You can't donate to me. I'm not. I'm not an on-air personality. I'm just a regular old activist. But you can listen to my political rantings over on Twitter.
Yeah, definitely. There's some really good rants, by the way. If you guys would like to, if you guys want to hear a good rant, you guys can also follow Luke on there. There is his link to his Twitter as well. So definitely. So, guys, thank you so very much. It was an honor and a pleasure to have you. Please don't be a stranger. I would like to have you guys back on just to talk about news stories and get your perspective on different events that are happening across the world and within the United States and even within here in the state of Florida as well. Okay.
Thank you so much, Jaybe. Really appreciate it. We'll be in touch.
Thank you so much, JB. Yeah, thank you so much, JB. And it's good to see you healthy and doing well. It is great, and it was an honor to be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. You guys take care, and I'll catch you guys on the interwebs.
Take care. Solidarity.
All right. Bye-bye.
Take care. Solidarity. Bye.
Solidarity. Bye-bye. All right, everybody. So, of course, that was Luke and Caleb from the Fort Lauderdale Food Not Bombs. Thank you so very much for sticking with me as I have this conversation with them. I know that sometimes talking about solutions is not the sexiest topic, but at the same time, it is probably one of the most worthy topics to pay attention to, because how else are we going to actually solve the issues that we rant and rave about? A lot of times, going after people who are, in independent media, that is the sexy thing, right? Is, going after people. But really, the main thing should be going after systems, right? Going after institutions that really threaten the very survival of our species as humans. And so I think that that's more of a worthy topic to be a part of. And so I just want to thank Luke and Caleb for joining me for that, because it's about focusing on, things that are heavy, but at the same time, they carry a lot of weight, and we can use that in order to be able to encourage to do more, so that we have less to complain about. We have less to rant about in the future. So thank you very much for that. So while we're at it, go ahead and do the damn thing. Go ahead and give a like to the stream. Thank you so very much to everybody for tuning in for that. And yes, so while we're at it, we're going to go into the chat really quick. But first, I would like to do a card, and then I'll be right back. Give it like 2 minutes. I'll see you in a second. All right, so let's go right into the chat and we will get into that. And then let's go on to the next subject, shall we? All right, so let's go into here. We're going to say our hellos as well as get into some of the thoughts from this interview. So, of course, we have starting us off. We have Notori coming in saying, "Love and cats, love and cats." Let's see. Michael Gong says, "Your father, whose father?" A father. We will be talking about that in a little bit. Thank you to Zoya. Zoya coming in saying, "Comment to boost." Absolutely. Kit from Heartlands Media was in the chat saying, "Happy Mother's Day to all you all and solidarity to everyone." Yes, happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there. And then, oh, thank you very much for this. He said, "Huge shout out to Jaybe Fund, everyone else in chat. Thank you so very much." Comrade Nick from RBN coming in saying, "Great panel, my brother JB. Thank you so very much. It means a lot." Of course, Zoya says, Nick is the GOAT, as well as Kid from Heartlands Media is a gem. Thank you very much. And then, of course, big shout out to Heartlands Media. Jimmy says, "Hi, y'all. Good to see ya." And then Nick is giving his flowers to Zoya. Says Zoya is love and Zoya is life. Had Ty G coming and saying, "Brevard Health Alliance is a local example. They provide free psychiatric health care, but in the process offer medications to people with no money." I have to be very careful with the way I say things, okay? But yes, medications. Jacqueline says, "People have been traumatized in one way or another for so long across the world that even if the problems were solved overnight into war, homelessness, food insecurity, it will take people years to get over that trauma." Yeah, it would have to take generations to get over it. It wouldn't be something that's overnight. Wouldn't even happen in 1 or 2 generations. We would literally have to phase it out over many, many periods of time. Let me see what else. Jacqueline says, "I know the people can't deposit money in public banks. They either have to use private banks, community banks, or credit unions. But isn't there a worry that private banks will put pressure on governments so that when people are paid salaries, wages, or benefits, they'll be forced to use private banks to deposit their money?" So a public bank is usually a bank that the deposit is really the government taking the tax revenue that's gathered and then putting it into the bank. And then, the bank, of course, grows the money in the market, and then they take that money back out and then they redistribute it, to build infrastructure. There can be, however, what we call a co-op type of financial institution, which is basically a credit union. So encouraging more credit unions, which are more cooperative types of financial institutions, would actually be a huge boom. Also, I'm a big fan of this. Bring back postal banking. Because the post office used to actually also have a bank. And so because they weren't seeking profit, then when it came to overdraft fees in general, there were little to none, right? So I would rather see more postal banking as well as credit unions to be our main financial institutions. I would love to see private banks being phased out. So there's that. But yes, thank you very much for that, Jacqueline. I think that's a really good question as well. I saw something. Hang on. Okay. All right. So, Jace Hart says, hello. Well, hello from Wisconsin. All right, Wisconsin, y'all. Aren't you guys the ones with the cheese? Hey, let me ask you this. Since you guys are the ones with the cheese, any chance I can get some pepper jack? Some pepper jack with some, Ritz crackers over here. I'll take saltines too, but pepper jack cheese. Bring that pepper jack cheese. All right. Yeah. That's my favorite. It is. It's so delicious. You just don't know. Pepper jack cheese is everything. And yes, I'm showing my big back right now, but I don't care. I need some pepper jack cheese in my life. Okay, I got some string cheese in the fridge right now. I had some earlier today, though. I can't have no more. But yeah, string cheese, pepper jack cheese. Lord. Whoever created pepper jack cheese, they were making cheese like Brent was doing. Okay. Oh my goodness. All right, everybody. So let's continue on. Yo, homie, you got that pepper jack? I need an eighth. Just give me a cube, man. Just give me a cube. Look, let me tell you something. I wouldn't be a crackhead. I'd be a cheesehead. All right. Because that pepper jack, that stuff goes, oh, my goodness. My goodness. Oh, gosh. I need to get off this subject really quick. Anyhow, let's move on. Oh, my goodness. All right. So what are we going to be talking about next? Well, this one's going to be more close to my heart. I think this is a very, it's a subject that made me mad. It made me mad and it made me sad. And I think this is one of the reasons why I think it's important that we fight against this system, because it is literally killing people left and right. And I do not like it one bit. So here's what I'm going to do. We are going to, let's go over here. And let's go into our next subject. We're going to talk about this dad that was denied a lung transplant. Yes, denied. Remember those death panels that people talked about back in the 2010s when it came to universal healthcare? Talking about death panels. Well, they exist, but they don't exist in a single payer healthcare system. They exist in private healthcare insurance. This subject is very close to my heart because as of tomorrow around 10-ish a.m., it will be 1 month since my transplant surgery. It'll be the one month anniversary tomorrow. So I found it apropos to speak about this, to speak on this as a transplant recipient. Because this story just solidifies my desire, my goal, and my fight for a nationalized healthcare system. Because with a nationalized healthcare system, the odds of this happening are very, very low. So I want to get into this. Those of you who may have not seen this will piss you off. Those of you who have already seen this, well, we're going to get into the nuts and bolts of this story. So it says insurance denies life-saving lung transplant. Let's go.
This devastates me.
Fighting for his breath, Duran Wells is battling stage 4 lung cancer. The husband and father of 3 is also now battling his insurance company.
I'm really sad that my life is in the hands of these decision makers who seem to make these decisions in such a cold way.
The 59-year-old and his family say Cigna had approved him for procedures that would allow him to be transferred to Northwestern Medicine in Chicago for a clinical trial double lung transplant he had been medically approved for. But Friday, as they were preparing to leave UCLA Medical Center Santa Monica, Cigna denied coverage for both the transplant and medical transfer to Illinois.
The last option we have is for us to take him to Northwestern, period. And I hope Cigna really understands the seriousness of the situation. We're not just a number. We were talking about his life.
It's devastating to me.
So let me get this straight. They denied his claim to get a double lung transplant. So therefore, they denied him a transplant. Remember, deny, defend, depose. Well, they're at that first stage. They're at the denial stage. The fact that this man, this father, needs a double lung transplant. And you can talk to any doctor. Just the red tape to be able to get something like this approved, it's like a mountain to go over. Because private insurance companies are so tight-fisted because they don't want to pay out anything. So they want this gentleman to keep paying his deductible, his premiums to the insurance company for years. But then when he needs it most, they say no. So they got all his money, but yet they're not going to help him when he needs it the most. Just to be able to get a transplant is a trial in itself, because qualifying for it, doing all the necessary testing, right? Now, remember, he has Cigna, which is a private insurance company. So, of course, he still has to go through hoops just to get the testing done. And then if there's something that needs to be fixed, then they have to fix that first before he could actually get to the transplant surgery. And so any way you slice it, it's a huge process to go through. I went through the entire transplant process in a year's time. And the only reason why it was so quick for me was because I was on dialysis for 17 years. And so, of course, I got moved to the top of the list. But what if I had just started dialysis a year ago? I'd still be on the list for another 5 years. So that on top of his blood type, his tissue type, right? As far as, dimensions, they have to have the dimensions of the chest cavity. They also have to look at other different accompanying systems. His cardiovascular system, how is that going to deal, right? They have to look at, digestive systems, because of course, your trachea and, where your breath goes, it separates from the esophagus. So you're going to have to see how that, works out, right? There's all these different things, right? Different pulmonary systems that come into play. And so guess what? These private insurance companies, they're going to say, well, can we do something else about it? And it's like, no, his lungs are shot. He needs new pair. There's nothing else that can be done. And yet they still denied him. Basically, they're saying his life is not worth saving. 59 years old, father of 3, his life is not worth saving because we don't want to spend the money. And people wonder why. They wonder why somebody like myself calls for a nationalization of healthcare. You notice I didn't say a single payer healthcare system. I said a full nationalization. My price went up. No, not single payer, nationalization. Because I want all profit out of healthcare. All profit, not just out of the health insurance system. I want all profit out of hospitals. I want all profit out of dialysis centers. I want all profit out of infusion centers. I want all profit out of oh my goodness, what's the word I'm looking for? Out of, I'm blanking on the word. Physical therapy. I want all profit out of medical device manufacturers. I want all profit out of big pharma. Imagine how that could have helped us, right? I want all profit out of it. No profit whatsoever. Meaning, therefore, it's going to have to be taken over by the people because there should be no profit seeking in healthcare, period. Hell, I would even go so far as gyms. No profit in gyms. Yeah, I said it. Because when it comes to your health, that is your life. Therefore, it should not be paywall at all. No. And don't come to me and go, oh, well, you want these people to be slaves and work for free? No. Here's what we do. We actually pull our resources together like a society should, and then make sure that they get paid well for the services that they provide. But it should not be out of my own pocket in order to pay an extra tax on something that really should be free at the point of service. I go back to the movie John Q. Sick help. Sick help. There should be nothing else. Nothing else at all. And if you think there's something else, do you think it should be paywalled in some way, shape, or form? You don't value life that much. Yeah, I'm going to say it. You don't value life. Because we can always pull our resources together. Hell, we do it for libraries. We do it for police. We do it for firefighting. We do it for the military. We do it for road construction. We do it for schools. But we can't do it for healthcare? What? So this is why it pisses me off. Because imagine if that was your dad. Imagine if that was your mother. Or your son, daughter, kid, niece, nephew, auntie, uncle. Imagine that was your grandparent. Would you still say the same thing? Oh, well, that's it. That's just how it goes. We just got to make sure that we pay them. You're paying a middleman to stand between you and your doctor to say yes or no to whether you live or die. Does that sound like freedom to you? Doesn't sound like freedom to me. It sounds like your life is being held hostage. We have a hostage situation right here. Hostage situation. His life is being held hostage because Cigna doesn't want to pay the money out, even though he paid hundreds, if not thousands upon thousands of dollars into them. And this is why the country as a whole reacted the way they did over Luigi Mangioni's alleged actions against Brian Thompson. See, I have to say alleged because we don't know if he actually did it or not. But even if he did, would that make him look bad in the eyes of the general public? No. It wouldn't. Because Cigna is literally holding the life of this man in their hands and saying, you know what? His life is not really worth the money. They place a monetary value on your life. They place a monetary value on your loved one's life. And you mean to tell me that doesn't radicalize you? Damn these health insurance companies. Damn them all. Let me share this as well. So says insurance denies man a life-saving lung transplant as he was preparing for procedure. That's the crazy part. It's not just that they said no initially. They said yes at first. Then they reneged on it. They gave it to him and then they ripped it out of his hands. Who does that? That's wicked. It's cruel. Darren Wells is battling stage 4 lung cancer. He said, I am really sad that my life is in the hands of these decision makers who seem to make decisions in such a cold way. As they were preparing to leave UCLA Santa Monica Medical Center on Friday, Cigna denied coverage for both the transplant and medical transfer to Illinois. You know, it says lung transplants are not a standard treatment for lung cancer. Comment, they say our coverage guidelines are grounded in national clinical standards to help ensure the best possible outcomes for patients. That's what Cigna said. As well stated in appeal, friends have launched a campaign to help him get the life-saving treatment. Darren deserves this chance that we're fighting so hard to make sure that he gets. Once active and healthy father says his fight for life isn't over. I am truly hoping that Cigna will change its tune. Will have a positive outlook on this because I am not done yet. Wells was told that he would get a response to his appeal by Thursday. Stage 4 cancer. Stage 4 lung cancer. And they denied him right when he was about to leave to get this life-saving treatment. All because, we don't treat lung cancer with lung transplant. All because they went through a national review. Meanwhile, not everybody has the same metrics in health. some people vary differently when it comes to their health. Not everybody has the same normal. And if the doctors, right? If, the lung doctors, if the transplant surgeons, if the nurse practitioners, if, the social workers, if and the coordinators, if they all agreed that this man needs his lung transplant, who is Cigna to say yes or no? Who are they? They're basically a middleman that wants to strip you of as much money as possible while denying you your right to health. That's what they are. The same of Blue Cross Blue Shield, same thing with United Healthcare, same thing with Aetna, same thing with all these different WellCare, all these different private health insurance companies. Profit is their number one goal. And of course, profit is their number one goal. Because it's literally in their structure of their shareholders. Now, I haven't did this in a while, but let's go over who is the shareholders of Cigna. Cigna Corporation. All right. So, Cigna, this is the CEO, is David Cordani. CFO is Ann Dennison. Chief Tech Science R&D Officer, Noel Elder, right? Nicola Jones is the Chief Administrative Officer. There you go. So let's go down to the shareholders. Well, what do you know? Shareholders for Cigna. Is it any surprise at all? Take a look. Vanguard, BlackRock, State Street, Fidelity Management. These are the ones that own Cigna. These are the ones that are basically saying deny, 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 and take their money, take their money, take their money. Any wonder why I talk about nationalizing the healthcare system? Because how many of these financial institutions like Vanguard, State Street, and BlackRock, how many of them also have ownership in hospitals? How many of them have ownership in Big Pharma? How many of them have ownership in medical device manufacturers? How many of them have ownership of nursing homes? How many of them have ownership in gyms? How many of them have ownership in these physical therapy centers? How many of them? Because guess what? Like, for instance, did you know that Samsung also makes X-ray machines? Philips, they'll make different machines. They have these same companies that'll make MRI machines, CT scans, right? GE, they'll make some of these same machines. How many of them are owned partially by these companies like Vanguard, BlackRock, and State Street? This is why I call for a full nationalization, because if they're fully nationalized, then therefore the companies like these, they can't have ownership of these companies. Therefore, it will not mean that they get to make as much profit as they can off of the backs of sick people. And so this is what this gentleman is dealing with. That's who's behind Cigna. That's who's behind denying his care. And so whenever we talk about getting rid of the private ownership of these health companies, this is what we're talking about. Because it needs to be owned by the people, not by these corporate entities. Because these corporate entities look for nothing but profit. How much does Cigna make? Let's take a look at that too. A lot of people are probably curious, how much does Cigna make over the last year? So let's go over their 2024 earnings. So Cigna Group full year 2024 earnings revenues beat expectations, right? So key financial results, they made in revenue $247.1 billion, up 27% from fiscal year 2023. Net income is from the United States is $3.43 billion. Now, apparently it's 34% down from 2023. Their profit margin was 1.4%, which is down from 2023. EPS is the shares is $12.25. So that went down. But you know, it's funny. You know what else happened in 2024? Well, Brian Thompson got whacked. So yeah, a lot of people probably are looking at health insurance companies even with even more critical eye now. And so this is why it is important, because all this money that these private health insurance companies are making, we could probably spend a fraction of that and still get the same outcomes if we had a nationalized healthcare system. You know, that bag of saline, which is manufactured in Puerto Rico and then brought over here, and it's probably manufactured for 50 cents a bag, and they're charging us $10. Well, instead of charging us, $10 for a bag of saline that was made for 50 cents, probably can charge us $1 per bag instead. And then whatever revenue that we make extra, instead of it going straight to the top, it goes straight to the workers. And so every single time I see stories like this, it is deeply upsetting, because then people will look at the Democrats and go, well, maybe we should just go with them. Meanwhile, companies like Cigna are also having lobbyists in government contributing to both parties in order for them to be able to make more money off of our backs. This is why both parties need to go. So this is why I wanted to bring this up. Because it's not just this gentleman receiving a lung transplant. Because the surgery is not the end of it. Post-surgery and recovery, he would still have to pay for doctor's visits, lab tests, medications, because of course, if he's getting lung transplant, then guess what that means? That means he's going to also need anti-rejection medications. He's going to need antivirals, anti-infectious medications, all these different things in order for him to be able to keep that transplanted pair of lungs as well. And that's money that, what if Cigna denies him post-transplant and says, well, he doesn't really need it, or we're going to cut his coverage away. So then he ends up losing the pair of lungs because they end up getting rejected. That's a whole nother animal that he could also be at risk for. This is why this system has to end, because it means the very lives of the people. What if that was your family member? Would you be fighting hard to make sure that they're able to get the health care that they need? Of course you would. But would you go so as far as change the system? I would hope so. And it should not take us to crowdfund for this gentleman in order to be able to receive the health care that he needs. It shouldn't have to take that. But how much you want to bet it will take that? That's why this system needs to end. So yeah, shame on these corporations, and let's continue to fight to make this system better for all. Go ahead and give a like to the stream. Thank you so very much. Let's get into the comments in the chat, and then we'll give a shout out to the patrons, and then we'll be on our way out. All right, so Jacqueline says these health insurance companies are playing God with people's lives. Yep. Friendly Brilliant says, and private insurance companies cover much more than Medicare. Do they really? Single payer is better than Medicare for all. Medicare for all is single payer. What you talking about? Single payer Kucinich bill covered everything, but Medicare covers almost nothing. Medicare would have been quicker to deny the transplant. What? Medicare is nonprofit and it is government ran. So therefore, they're less likely to deny claims because they're not trying to keep profit. Number one. Two, Medicare for all is single payer, by the way. So I don't know what you're talking about there. Let me see. And also, by the way, as far as bills concerned, I actually read Bernie Sanders' bill. And it says Medicare covers almost nothing. No, Medicare covers everything for the most part. It's just it covers it at 80%, right? Versus the bills that people like Pramila Jayapal and Bernie Sanders were proposing would be a 100% coverage instead of an 80%. And it would be comprehensive because it would cover mental, dental, vision, and long-term care. So it wouldn't be the existing Medicare that we see right now. It would be an expanded version of Medicare, and it would extend from people from the womb to the tomb. So I don't know where you get your information from, but Medicare for all is actually a single payer. Now, I say that that's not good enough. we need a fully nationalized healthcare system. But we got to get the facts straight. Medicare for all is a single payer healthcare plan. So, yeah. Let me see. Thank you so much to Powell Linowski. Says, hi, JB. Much love from the liberal hellscape called Europe. Social democracy. I can't say that word. I'll say stupid class consciousness massively here. I recommend reading What is to be Done by Lenin and Assassination of Julius Caesar by Parenti. I read one of Parenti's books called Dirty Truths, and I hadn't read Lenin yet, What is to be Done. But as far as the social democracies are, a lot of times people will point to them and say, this is what we need, this is what we have to have. But at the same time, social democracies will exploit the global South in order to have the prosperity that they have. So this is why I don't rock with social democracies, because they're still exploiting somebody. So, but yes, you're correct on that. So, but thank you very much also for the super chat. Of course, Zoya, I see that. Kate Mack says, JB, tell your mom I wish her a happy Mother's Day and I thank her for all the perfection she delivered. Oh, you're so sweet. My mom doesn't celebrate Mother's Day, though. My mother's Jehovah's Witness. She doesn't celebrate it. But the sentiments are very welcome. Thank you very much. But yes, she doesn't celebrate it. But thank you very much for that. All right, so let me check to see. I don't think there's anything on Rockfin. Oh, yep, there is. There is Rockfin. So let me go to the Rockfin chat, and then we will head on out. All right. And away we go. All right. Thank you very much for this. Roger says, happy Joe Mama's Day, James. Yes, I'm talking about your mama, and I'm wishing her to be happy. What you going to do about it? I can't do nothing about it. Roger says, DM, I think this would be a very hard lift to run as a CBIA. It would also challenge the people in our political realm who own homes to be willing to give up their wealth to permanently end homelessness. I used to say CBI amendment to make private equity unconstitutional from owning homes. Then I went to hospitals and I said, you know what? Why not kill all birds with one stone and just CBI amendment to make it unconstitutional for them to operate, exist, and own anything in the state of fill in the blank. Transfer all ownership to the workers, community, or let it be state ran. He said, after that, we don't want Medicare for all. We want TRICARE for all. Funny how you brought up for a lung story. I was debating someone. He said, why should my taxes go to pay for someone to get lung transplant when they've been smoking all their life? That's not right. I said, so do you want to get rid of Medicare? He said, no, he thinks it needs to be reformed. I said, well, by going by your argument, why should my tax dollars go to pay for someone who smoked all their life? Then by the time they became eligible for Medicare, they get lung cancer. That's not fair. He never responded to me after that. Check DM about homeless. Okay. Yeah, it's like people go, well, why should my money go to somebody who did all these horrible things to themselves? Like they'll be like, oh, they didn't live a life that was healthy. Here's my problem, right? Here's the thing, and mini rant coming on, but let's say you hypothetically live in the hood and you live in a food desert, and the only food that was really available to you is the food at the convenience store. And then that's what you eat because that's what you can afford because, well, the pay has been stagnant the entire time. You really can't make much. And of course, there's things like systemic racism and all these different things, these systems that cause to keep us, with a boot on our necks. And if that person ends up getting diabetes, then is that person's fault for getting diabetes? Because apparently they can't make the right choices, even though they live in an area where there's a food desert. So therefore, they end up getting diabetes anyway. So is that person's fault or is it the system's fault? My question is that if the system was perfect, if the system actually was conducive for people to actually live a healthy life, then why are we punishing people for a system that they can't really control? My question is, are we going, like, for instance, why do people smoke cigarettes first? Why do they smoke it? Can we talk about how Philip Morris knew that cigarettes would be addictive and then they pushed it anyway? Can we talk about that? About how they got government subsidies as well? Can we talk about how Big Sugar gets subsidies in order to be able to push sugar in our way? Who does the blame all fall on? So if we're going to go that route, then we got to blame also government entities and things like that. So if it all doesn't fall on them, then guess what? Who has the responsibility to make sure that people get healthy because they allowed the system, the environment to suppress us in that way? Well, wouldn't it be the government? Well, I guess then the government would need to do a full reversal and actually making sure that we're actually taken care of because we're unhealthy. I mean, you could say, well, just because they got mesothelioma, it's not my fault they decided to take that job, even though the government approved the people being able to use asbestos within their homes and businesses back then. But now they got these diseases. Well, it's their fault because they're the one that took the job. Like, what are we doing here? I don't care if somebody did something. I don't care if a person played chicken on the road and then they end up getting their legs messed up. So what? People make mistakes. People do stupid shit. But that doesn't mean that we condemn them to a life of either death or being maimed if we can help it. Let the lesson be, yeah, you should need to change your life or turn your life around. But it's also hard to do it when you have a system that doesn't facilitate that. Because they don't want you to facilitate it. They don't want to facilitate it because that means that they would get less power. That means they would get less money. That means that they would have to exploit less. I can't stand that argument. And also, it's a shitty ass argument. It's an argument that's devoid of empathy. Let me share this. Sorry, Roger, you got me. You got me riled up over that one. It says treating housing as a commodity means valuing homes primarily as investments for financial gain rather than primarily as a place to live and a social good. This perspective can lead to speculation, rising prices, and displacement of residences. Here's a more detailed explanation. It says financialization of housing. When housing becomes a commodity, it is treated like a financial asset, similar to stocks or bonds, with the goal of maximizing profit through speculation and investment. Impact on affordability. The shift can make housing increasingly unaffordable for many, especially those with lower incomes, as prices are driven up by market forces rather than fundamental needs for a shelter. Consequences is speculation. Investors buy property with the intent of selling it for a higher price, later contributing to rising prices. Gentrification, displacement. As prices increase, long-term residents may Long-term residents may be unable to afford to stay, leading to displacement and changes in the character of a neighborhood. Limited supply, focus on profit can discourage the construction of new affordable housing, further exacerbating the problem. Contrast with housing as a social good. Housing as a social good emphasizes the importance of ensuring that everyone has access to safe, affordable, adequate housing. And if you make sure that everybody has access to housing, then guess what? There's no homelessness. Exactly. Yeah. And we're going to end with this one here. Zoya says, for them, it's a belief, not fact-based. So facts won't change their mind. The economy will. Tell them all war benefits corporations in Ukraine is being brought up by BlackRock. Ask if they support that. Good point, Zoya. Speaking of which, I got to get going. But thank you so very much to everybody for tuning in. I'll be heading on out. If you guys would like to, please make sure to like the stream on your way out. Thank you very much. And I will see you guys on Tuesday for my channel. And so, yeah, we have some news stories to cover. It's going to be a good one. All right, everybody. So like I always say, water your plants, water yourselves, leave the world better than you found it. Do all the things if you got them. I hope you guys have a wonderful, beautiful Mother's Day, and please take care of yourselves and be kind to others, including yourself, because you've been through a lot. All right. Mwah, forehead kisses. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.